Hi guys, it's Shar. Welcome back to my channel, Craftin' Up a Storm. Today I have some more fruit-inspired home decor for you for your tiered trays. I had so many ideas for our 5 under 5 challenge. I couldn't put it all in one video, so I've got some more budget-friendly fruit-inspired decor for you. Hopefully you'll be able to find something that matches the theme of your tiered tray for the summer. Let's get crafting. For this project, I picked some of the Paracord and a light bulb up. The Paracord is in the automotive section at Dollar Tree. I thought it was the perfect pear color. It was this yellow with a little bit of green tinge to it. So we're gonna wrap around this light bulb and make a pear. I glued the end of the cord to the tip of the light bulb and I just started swirling around. This tip of the light bulb is probably the hardest part. Once you get past this, it's not too bad to twist it around. I just put some glue and then twisted the cord and pushed it into the glue. I tried to keep it as flat and even as possible. Also, I tried not to put too thick of a layer of glue because I didn't want the glue to come up through the sides of the cord. I didn't want it to show. So I tried to keep the layers of hot glue thinner. I failed in a lot of areas, so once it was completely done, I did have to go in and clean up some of the little blobs of glue that came through. But it wasn't too difficult. Once I got a little further down, it did become easier to wrap around. I also did a version of this using the jute twine, and that took a little bit longer because it's smaller, but it came out cute as well too. I wanted to show you this version just because I like the color. But either or will work. This light bulb is plastic, so you don't have to worry about it breaking on you. It also makes it a little easier for that glue to adhere. It kind of, it melts into it. You don't worry about it melting it, but it does kind of meld into it a little bit. It's easy and lightweight. And I just continued to wrap around. Again, I tried to keep that glue as thin as possible, but it did come up and around the sides a little bit. See, right there. A lot of that I could just take off. It came off of it pretty easy. I was worried, since it came off kind of easy, about the cord not sticking and staying down, but it stayed down really well. It worked out. I just continued to wrap around. The cord is wide enough, but not too wide, that going around the curve of this light bulb was not difficult. Just making sure it stuck down. You can see I've got some hot glue globs that I'll clean off once I'm done. I just continued wrapping until I got to the very end, and then I knew about where I could cut it and tuck the end into the middle circle. Now, because it was such a bright yellow, almost kind of neon yellow, I did go in with some Waverly chalk paint in ivory, but I watered it down a lot. And since the cord is nylon, it doesn't soak it up a lot. So it really kind of dried. I even wiped it a little afterward to wipe off any extra if I got it too heavy in areas, because I still wanted that yellow and tinge of green to show through. So it looks heavy right here, but once I was done, it was just a light coating on the top. It still had that beautiful yellowy and green color to it. I'm gluing some leaves. They're just extra from any floral sprigs or bouquets that I didn't use. I did go get a twig for these fruit. I went and got a twig off my tree in the front yard, and I just cut off a piece, hot glued it to the top for my stem. And there it is. Super easy. I'm going to use the pack of 4. I end up only using 2 out of it, which leaves me 2 to do a different project. But I'm going to take the 2 dice. I used, I think, the red and the yellow, and I'm going to paint them with this red acrylic paint. It took a couple coats to cover up those dots, but I made sure they were had plenty of coats on them and covered them up good. Oh yeah, that's right. Now I'm using the Waverly chalk paint in the red color. Now I want to add some detail to it. So I'm going to, at the top, we're making cherries. So at the top, I'm going to dry brush some lighter pink on. And it really doesn't matter the color as long as it's just a lighter shade. I didn't go too light pink. I'll try and list in the description all my colors, but just a lighter color pink to add some dimension to the top. I'm using a fan brush. I like using that a lot of times for small dry brushing. To add more dimension, I'm now going to go into the bottom and add a darker red. It's kind of a wine red that I'm adding to the bottom. I'm doing the same technique as the top, and I'm just going to go add to the bottom some shadow shading. I'm also then going to go back around and accentuate the corners, the edges, with that same color. And it just adds dimension to your project. Now I'm going to make some stems. For these stems, I took a leftover piece of wire from the floral. I just wrapped twine around it, and I just wrapped twice around the top so that I had a thick bulb on the top. And then I wrapped down the wire. I singed off the extra hairs, and those are our long cherry stems. Now I'm going to take some wire. You can get floral wire from Dollar Tree very easily. The thicker floral wire would be fine too, or the thin green. I just happen to have this wire. So I'm just wrapping it into 2 long teardrop loops to make leaves. I'm going to then take my twine and glue it to the very middle, and I'm going to start wrapping that twine around this leaf. I'll wrap all the way around to the rounded end or edge of the leaf, and then I'll come back so that there's 2 layers of twine on each leaf. Once I come back to the middle, I'll then do the same thing on the other side. And I just put a dollop of glue every so often. Once I got to the edge, it was a little tricky because the twine just wanted to slip off, even if I had glue on it. So I ended up having to take and put it down on, I used a mat to protect my work surface. See, it just wants to keep slipping off. So I got a mat out to protect my work surface, and then I also used a piece of, I like to use, if I happen to have a scrap piece of backing from any vinyl that I've used, because it usually has a coated side to it, so it's non-stick. And I just put some glue down, and then I held the twine down. So if I could hold the twine in place until it solidified and the glue held, then it wouldn't slip off the edge. So I had to just go real slow and just keep holding it in place until it was cooled. Once it was kind of cool and sticky and gummy, it held. And I could just keep wrapping. And then again, I just went back down the leaf, so I had 2 layers. Now here I'm going backwards. Once I got to the middle, I went out to the other side of the leaf and back again and ended in the middle. I'm singeing off the extra fibers, and I'm going to take and tint these. I used some Waverly chalk paint in moss, and I put a lot of water in with it, and I'm just putting a tint to it. It's a very light coat. You can hardly see it, but it just gives it a little bit of a green tint. Now I'm going to glue. I kind of curved the middle of it, and I glued that curve to our stem, and then I did a loopy bow, and I'm going to put that onto the front side. So the leaves are on the back side, the bow is on the front side. Now I'm going to make some felt flowers, and I just used some red felt that I had, cut out a couple little squares, cut them into roughly a circle shape. Doesn't have to be perfect. Now I'm going to make that swirl. Just start on one end and just keep cutting toward the middle until you have that swirl shape. When you get to the very middle, you can see there's kind of a round dot in the middle. It does not have to be perfect. In fact, it's better when it's not perfect. Just try and keep it as even as possible so that you don't have a thick edge and a thin edge. Felt can tear if it gets too thin. Now I start with the outside of my swirl, and I just start wrapping it in on itself. And I know it's kind of hard to see. I'm a little bit in the shadow, but I just keep wrapping it around itself. I didn't even stop and put any glue on it, just simply because this flower is so small already. Larger flowers, I think you can put a little dollop of glue every so often, and you can do it on this if you felt you have to, but I didn't to this entire flower until I got to the end, and it held just fine. And I just keep wrapping it. Again, not perfect, and it's better when it's not perfect. Once I got to basically the center of our swirl where that dot was at, I moved it out of the way. And now you can see all of our layers are swirled together, and I just put some hot glue on it. And then I glued that circle or dot to the bottom of it, and that holds it in place. Because there was a little glue that I missed on the edge. I lifted the edge up and put a little hot glue in there, and that's it. That's how you make one of these small felt flowers. There you have it. I glued one into each center of the bow on the stem. You can see the paint colors better too in this picture as well. They came out super cute. For this project, I found this beat up little sign at Dollar Tree. I liked the frame. I liked the size of the frame and the beads at the top. And I'm going to cover up the sign that's inside, so I wasn't worried about it. I did take the staples off the sides and the back and take the beads off. And I'm just going to flip the sign over and use the back of it. I painted the back with Waverly chalk paint and plaster. And I sanded the sides down. They had some glue and some scratches on it, so I kind of sanded the sides down a little bit just to clean them up. And then I painted the frame in Waverly chalk paint moss color. I did a couple coats just because the frame's black, so I wanted to make sure it was good and covered. Chalk paint covers pretty well, but I think I did at least two coats. I didn't distress this frame. For all you viewers that don't much care for distressed, I didn't. I just left it solid. Now I'm going to get these styrofoam pieces. They have packs. The small pack styrofoam balls come in packs of 6, and the larger ones that I'm using come in a pack of 4. I'm going to cut them in half because I want to use them to decorate my frame, and I don't know which size I want to use. I started painting them a very light peachy color and then realized I needed to do some more to it. So I did cut a little V out of one edge to make the top of my peach. And then I just took the V and extended the line down a little bit, kind of making it a little wider at the top and thinner at the bottom of that line. And then I just took a little snip of the edge off so the corners weren't very sharp, and that rounded it up, and that's how I made my peach shape on all of them. Some of them I made the line go out a little off to the side. Now I'm going to take a little bit darker peachy color, and I mixed in some good baking soda to my paint and realized it still didn't get down into the holes. These styrofoam balls are very porous, and it just didn't want to get down into it. So what I did while the paint was still wet is I went in and I just sprinkled baking soda over the top of it. And that helped it just kind of fall into the cracks and crevices on here and kind of fill those porous holes in this styrofoam up a little bit. And I kind of just sprinkled it everywhere. I put a lid underneath to catch the extra, and I just patted it in there. Once I had that on, I went back over it with a paint again and dabbed it on there, and that kind of filled those holes up a lot better. I did that with all of those. It kind of became very paste-like, but it worked. Now I'm going to add some dimension. And I went in with a more yellowy, slightly orange but yellowy color, and I went on the inside of my top of my peach, and then I went to highlight the top around where the peach kind of curves. So I added some brighter color there. And it looks a bit like I'm just dabbing color on top. But once I do this, I go back in with that same peachy orange and kind of blend it a little better. So it's not just so distinct between the two colors. So now I'm going back over the top and I'm blending that in. So that yellow just kind of shows up through my top layer of peach. And you just see it through, and it gives that highlight. This is a very thin top layer of peach, and it'll allow that yellow to kind of come through. Now I'm going to go into add some of my shadowing, and I'm using a more reddish color. And I'm going to go into where the crevice is in the peach and toward the bottom, and add those colors in, and then kind of brush a little bit over the top of everything. It just adds some depth and dimension and light and shadow to your fruit and makes it look a little more real. I did pull up a picture on the internet of a painting of one that kind of gave me more of where I wanted to put my shadow and my light on my little peach. And that's how it came out. I used a twig from my tree for a stem, and some leftover leaves. I did this on almost all these fruit pieces. I used leftover leaves from floral stems that I used the flowers but didn't need all the leaves. So I just poked that twig into the top of my peach. And then for this, because I'm going to put it down on the frame, I wanted the leaves just to kind of lay down flat behind my peach. And so now I'm going to get my frame out, and I'll see kind of how I want to arrange it. I also wanted to go ahead and put my little saying on my sign. So on my Cricut, I did break down and use my Cricut this time. I printed out "Life is Peachy." I did "Life" in a scripty font and a little bit darker brown, and "is peachy" in a more simple font and a little bit lighter brown. I put "life" a little off to the side just to add a little character. And that's my sign. I put that into the frame so I can see where I wanted to lay the peach. I think I'm going to put it up in this corner. And I liked all three leaves because there were two light leaves and a little bit darker leaf. So now I'm going to put some glue down, and I'm going to glue down those two light colored leaves. And I did take the dark leaf and I just kind of put a little glue at the bottom and tucked it into that crevice around the stem of my peach. That way it kind of stuck up a little bit, gave it a little dimension, and then I glued my peach down in the corner. I took and put those beads back on a wire, and I bent the wire edge and stuck it into the very edge of that frame where the back goes. Put a little extra hot glue on it. After I had it in there, I put a dab of hot glue to keep it held in place right there. And there's my "Life is Peachy" frame. I picked up this cute sign at Dollar Tree and I thought it would be a perfect watermelon shape. So I popped the little BFF cardboard off the front and I took the paper off of the paper. Actually came off pretty easy. And I'm now going to paint it. I wanted just to start with a solid color, so I'm painting it in Waverly chalk paint plaster. Now I'm going to go in with a light green folk art acrylic and I'm just going to make the rind on the top. I'm not worried about it being perfect. I just want a good stripe of the light green. I'm kind of going in to do a thicker stripe, not thin, because I will go in with a darker green for the edge. I'm leaving the white in between this and the red melon part because there's always kind of that white area on your melon as well. So I did go ahead and cover the edge as well with this light green because it's going to show through a little bit when I do some stripes later with the darker green. Now I'm going to go in with my red, and I'm not using a bright red. It's kind of more of a pink red acrylic paint, and I am just doing a half circle because I'm going to put something at the bottom of this. I'm not worried about it being specifically all the way down to the bottom. Here's where I'm taking a darker green acrylic paint and I'm going just around the very edge to make that dark green rind. I do end up coming in and making this a little bit thicker. I realized my light green rind was a little too wide. As I'm going along, notice I'm going and just striping up the sides. Because this acrylic paint doesn't completely cover, this leaves kind of a neat striped effect across the side. Kind of like the striped rind of a watermelon. And then some of that light green ends up kind of showing through as well. I'm not worried about it being exact. I want it to be darker in some areas, lighter in others. That's more natural. I am making it a little bit thicker here, but I think I do go back and make it even thicker once I'm done. And then just kind of stripe down the sides. Just kind of going in this way makes it blends that a little bit from the light green into the dark green. Now I'm going to go in with my small paintbrush and just paint some kind of teardrop shapes with some black acrylic paint. Those are my seeds. And I'm just going down as far as I want to with the seeds. I do plan on putting something at the bottom. I'm using the craft sticks, the larger craft sticks from Dollar Tree. I believe they were from Dollar Tree. I might have got them at Walmart. They actually go perfect across the bottom and cover the whole bottom, but I want to do a shiplap effect to it, so I took a stick and I randomly just cut it into a couple of different sections. I wanted them to be good and straight, so I'm using my ruler. Sometimes when I use my scissors, it cracks it a bit. And I'm just randomly cutting them into a couple pieces. I'm gonna put these back together and use the whole entire stick, but I wanted them to have some sections. And now I'm gonna take my next stick, and because I don't want those lines to be in the same place, I put my first one down so that I know where to cut so that they're not lined up. And I just cut this stick into random sections as well. I also tried to make sure I kept them kind of together so I knew what piece went next to which piece. Now I'm taking a kind of sharp tool and I'm just making 2 dots on the end of each of these pieces. This will serve as kind of nail holes. Faux nail holes is what it'll look like. So I'm just poking it down. I'm not worried about it going all the way through. Now I'm going to take my emery board and I'm going to sand where I cut those. I also want to round out the edges a little bit so they're not so straight up and down. I just want a little bit of a rounded to each piece. Once that's done, I'm going to stain these. And some of that stain will kind of rest in those holes that I pressed in there, and it'll look like little nail holes. I'm taking some Waverly chalk paint in Moonlight. I wanted a gray color to them. I'm not worried about it being completely solid and putting several coats. I just want this undercoat to be a light gray. I'm trying to also go over the edges so that the edges aren't still raw wood. Once this dries, on top of this, I'm going to add that kind of faux stain. I just used a very watered down dark gray, and I brushed it over and then I wiped most of it away. The longer that you let it stay on, the darker it's going to be. So I kind of just put it on, and this actually might be a black paint. I think it is the black, just watered down a lot. Now I wanted a little bit of stripe or distressed stripe over the top of it, so I did go back over with a a little bit more paint, and that way it kind of gave me that wood grain effect to it. Now I'm going to glue these individual pieces on, and I will say, because I used wood glue, it's going to stay and it's going to glue flat down to it, which is better than the hot glue because that's a little thicker. However, because these craft sticks are thin, it did kind of make them warp up a little bit, so I did have to use those clamps. Now I made a saying on my Cricut. I used kind of a creamy, almost yellowy color vinyl, and I printed out Sweet Summertime. And I put that on the top of my faux shiplap on the bottom. And because this is a nice thick little sign, I don't have to put any wood blocks to help hold it up. It just stands up on its own really well. I love this one. I hope you enjoyed these projects today as much as I enjoyed making them and bringing them to you. If you would like to see more of these type of videos, let me know in the comments. Consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. I'd love to have you as part of the community. Thank you, and as always, keep crafting. Bye-bye.